hundreds of cases being filed in our office and watching the individuals come to court and watching how those cases are being handled and then the ultimate outcomes in some of those matters. And it does seem like an inordinate amount of resources are wasted on cases that basically are filed as felonies with multiple defendants and ultimately get reduced to misdemeanors or a diversion type plea and dismissed. So we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars wasted on those cases when, if we had guidelines, we could hit it head on and make decisions before even filing, therefore saving money for the county.
Well, I don't really think that answered the question, but and this hundreds of thousands of dollars allegation, I don't really understand either. I don't understand the correlation between guidelines and filing and saving money. I will tell you that I set the policy. I'm very concerned at all the hands that just went up in the room, and so I would like to know what your story is, because clearly the policy that I've set isn't being followed. If every hand raised in this room is indeed a legitimate patient who has been prosecuted in this county under my tenure. So I'd like to know that information. But I will tell you also that there are marijuana cases that are legitimately filed. There are people that are using the laws that protect your rights illegally, and those are the people, hopefully, that we're focusing our prosecution efforts on. And just because I'm not out of time, I don't think, she hasn't held up it yet, I want to just go back on the analyst. This analyst, he doesn't just sit there and open files and count them the way the part-time person did before. We have more cases coming through the office, and this analyst's job is actually mostly to go out and apply for, secure, and administer grants to make up for the incredible loss of staff that I've suffered since I took office. Keep in mind, budget cuts reduced the staff in my office. We had to reallocate resources. Ultimately, I was able to find funding for an analyst. As a result, he's been able to secure and administer over $1 million in grant funding from exterior sources that have enabled us to bring in people like vertical prosecutors for DUI prosecution. Things of that nature that we wouldn't ordinarily be able to do. He doesn't just sit there and count beans. Thank you.
Next question, kind of two-part, one for Victoria, one for Jill. For Victoria, first, thank you for your service. How will your administration be different than Jill's current leadership? For Jill, thank you for your service. How will your administration be an advantage for Sonoma County, specifically if you are re-elected? And I've lost my place. Who went first last time?
She did, but she can go again.
Oh, okay. Ms. Ravitch.
Okay. Well, thank you for thanking me for my service. It's a tough job, I have to tell you, and I think that, I guess the question is that the question? That's the question. Okay, thank you for your service. How will your administration be an advantage for Sonoma County, specifically if you're re-elected? I think I've done a good job. I understand what the issue is for this group, the primary issue, but I ask you to step away from the primary issue that brings you in here tonight and take a look at public safety and take a look at what I've done for Sonoma County. And I guess I'll save most of that for my closing remarks to you. But I do think that my experience, my time in the courtroom, as well as now my time in the district attorney's office as the lead of an office of 120 staff members with a $22 million budget, has really helped me, I believe, define how we can best serve our community. And I think we've had a lot of success under my tenure, and I think it's success that we can continue to see going forward if I am honored to be reelected as your district attorney. Thank you.
Well, I'll be different in the way you'll know where I'm coming from. I'll have policies in place. You'll know the direction of the office. Marijuana will actually be a low priority, and that serious and violent crime will be the priority. I will be a decisive leader. You will know my position on the various issues that affect this community. I won't hide from that. You'll be very clear about where I stand on different issues. I'll be transparent, and I'll make reforms within the office that were promised but were never achieved under this current administration. I'm bringing leadership back into the D.A.s office. That is my hope. Thank you.
Thank you. This question. And by the way, as to the questions, I cannot vouch for the veracity of them, but we're going to go through them regardless. Most plea agreements include restrictions on medical cannabis patients to 2 ounces or less of possession of medicine, no opportunity to cultivate. Why are patients required to purchase, not cultivate their medicine? Ms. Shanahan?
I'm not really sure why we're doing that. Again, a policy would be helpful in our office. It would give guidance to our district attorneys who are prosecuting these cases. I'm not sure why we're doing that. You might need to ask Ms. Ravitch that specific question. It just seems really all over the map on how we're handling cases, and I can't make sense of it. Thank you.
Ms. Ravitch, most plea agreements indicate restrictions on medical cannabis to 2 ounces, and patients can't grow their own.
I'm not aware that patients can't cultivate their own medicine, so I can't really speak to that. I think what they're looking for in the plea agreements is some sort of, and I'm not sure which cases are resulting in 2 ounces or less of possession of medicine either. So it's kind of hard to respond to something in a vacuum. Again, whoever wrote this, if you want to talk to me and have me take a look at what's going on with your case or with the case that you're concerned about, I'm happy to do that. The district attorney's office takes a look at each case individually. It's important to have general policies in place, which is what we have endeavored to do so that there can be consistency in how we handle the prosecution of marijuana cases and other cases. That's why they're handled vertically, which means the same deputies review the police reports and take them all the way through completion to the extent that they're able to, given the volume of cases. Every case stands on its own. If somebody comes in and says, I'm a patient, here's my recommendation, here's my situation, we take a look at that. That's very different than somebody who's a trafficker or somebody who's engaged in some other nefarious activity that is not allowed under the law. Each of our prosecutors is charged with knowing the law, and they've given me really great outlines of cases that they're keeping up on, and they provide this information to other line staff like Ms. Shanahan so that they can be well versed in the law. But I ask you, let's remember, the law changes all the time. You could be prosecuting a case one day, same set of facts, a month later, a case has come down that changes the law here in California. That's how in flux and that's how vague things are ever since 215.
Thank you. Did you answer that question?
I did.
Oh, sorry. I'm losing my place here because I have so many questions and so little time. Timekeepers, candidates, can we go to 1 minute on the answers now? 1 minute. Many Moreland Avenue residents were raided by a cooperative of federal agencies, state agencies, with the help and assistance of local law enforcement, many of whom were in possession of the proper permits. Is this something that you approved of, Ms. Ravitch? If so, why? And Ms. Shanahan, what would your position be with respect to cooperating with the feds in these types of raids in the future? I believe you're up, Ms. Ravitch.
Yeah, I think it was, the question was, did I approve of it? No, I didn't approve of it. This was a law enforcement endeavor, and I don't want to speak to it any further because I don't know what the status is of any cases that may have come out of this particular endeavor. But the police are different than the district attorney's office. The police go out and do what they do. We hope that they communicate with us to some extent to understand what the parameters are of cases that we will file, but we don't get to tell them who they can go out and investigate and who they can go out and arrest. They will come to us for the purpose of getting search warrants approved, but with regard to putting together some sort of enforcement effort, that's within the purview of these agencies. And so you'd have to go back and take a look at who was running the operation and have this conversation with them.
But you have a right to speak out about it publicly on your position.
At least you would.
Yes, in your response, you might pass that card over.
I did.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm not familiar with what information law enforcement had. Ms. Ravitch does speak to law enforcement can do what they do and investigate the cases. Then it comes to the DA's office. So it sounds like we filed on everyone in that investigation. Again, if we had guidelines, we had policies in place, we would know whether or not we'd file on an individual if they were in compliance with the guidelines or not. And we wouldn't file even if law enforcement brought the cases to us. So without knowing the facts of each and every one of those cases and not sure if they're pending as well, you know, again, guidelines would help, policies would help, consistency would be the result.
Thank you. This should be quick. Do small growing collectives of less than 15 or 20 patients need to pay taxes and obtain county permits, Ms. Shanahan?
Well, I think if you're gonna operate as a collective and you're gonna expect reimbursement for your services, I think you should be operating as a business and be transparent. If you don't want law enforcement sniffing at your door, have all the proper documentation. The DA's office has our policy in place. We don't prosecute individuals who are operating legitimately. Again, it's a closed loop situation, it's a not-for-profit situation, and your records need to show that.
So, do small growing collectives need
Yeah,
permits?
again, I think when you take a look at what a collective is, it's a group of individuals that come together to cultivate and use medical cannabis for medicinal purposes. So the question is whether or not that definition is met. And I think you have to look at it on a case-by-case basis. But I'm not aware of the county permitting for the smaller collectives.
Thank you. Ms. Ravitch, please respond. I'm an attorney, a Sonoma County narcotics officer told my paralegal, we spend so much time on pot, we can't follow up on meth leads. Both candidates?
Really? Wow. Who's first?
I think you're...
Okay. My response is I'm really concerned about that. I'm just looking at I'm trying to read whoever wrote this. They should have been a doctor instead. Narcotics officer told my paralegal, we spend so much time on pot, we can't follow up on meth leads. I think this is something, depending upon what agency this narcotics officer works with, this should come to the attention of their supervisor, because obviously methamphetamine is a very, very dangerous drug, and I can't speak to the policies of either the sheriff's office or the Santa Rosa Police Department. Those are the two departments that have narcotics task forces, or to the other agencies for that matter, if this is a narcotics officer from a different agency.
Obviously, meth is a very serious problem in this community. Illicit drugs such as meth and heroin, it's a problem. Again, law enforcement speaking, I've heard the same sentiments. Lots of cases being handled, lots of cases being pushed through the court system, taking years for prosecution, officers having to show up. They can't focus their resources on more important crimes such as meth abatement and heroin and other serious and violent crime. And I think law enforcement would benefit from the district attorney's office taking a leadership role within this community and saying, the buck stops here with us. We won't be filing on these types of cases. Focus your investigations on other more important cases.
With respect to Sonoma County guidelines, when a marijuana trial involves marijuana, will you agree to let the guidelines go into evidence and be considered by a jury if the judge allows? Ms. Shanahan?
Well, there's all kinds of evidentiary issues there. I'm not really sure how to answer that because, you know, if we stipulate that there's Sonoma County guidelines, I would be happy to stipulate there's Sonoma County guidelines. But again,